right, the last one in chapter 2 is the Madisonian System, and what this is, it talks about, it's all about checks and balances, okay, and how one branch of government works, what their jobs are, and how they work to check and balance the power of the others. So it starts off and it talks about Madison's Federalist 51, and the quote is, and please read the quote on page 47, and we probably will go over it in class, but it says, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. Then it skips ahead and it says, but it says neither. It says you must first enable the government to control the government, and then in the next place oblige it to control itself. So what that means is the government needs to control the people because they're not angels, but however the government has to have a system in place, as Madison states in Federalist Paper 51 states, the government needs to have a system in place to control itself. Well, that's what this Madisonian system is about, and that's what you need to understand. Okay, so he was worried about, he wanted to prevent the tyranny of the majority. In other words, would a large group of people or the majority take over and overthrow the government? So in your notes, make sure you've got, he proposed the following things. 1, place as much as the government under possible beyond the direct control of the majority. So in other words, only the majority would control a small part of the government. And they're talking about the elite. 2nd, separate the powers of different institutions. So you can't have, like, each branch of government has a different set of powers, and that's something we're going to address in January and February more, but you need to understand that they have different sets of powers. And 3rd, construct a system of checks and balances. The system of checks and balances mean that the right hand checks the left hand, and the right hand knows what the left hand's doing, but they're doing something different things, and they got to check each other to make sure they're doing the right things. A good example of that would be presidential executive orders, and they can be deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Another thing would be veto powers. A president can veto a bill. Congress can veto a presidential bill. So there's lots of checks and balances set up in our Constitution. Now, so the first thing they talked about in this section was limiting majority control, and Madison was worried that there was he wanted to thwart the tyranny of the majority. One thing was the House of Representatives and how it was set up, and it was set up where they only had 2-year terms. Now they can serve for life as long as they keep getting reelected. However, that's the thing, they have to get reelected, and this means that it would be a lot more difficult for the House of Representatives to be controlled by a majority because the people could continuously reelect them. So if the House of Representatives started to run amok and it started to be out of control, then in 2 years there would be another election and the people could vote them out. Now, in contrast, the state legislators elected senators who had 6 years, and the reason this is important is because these guys are elected less, so they are probably not as influenced as much by the people and their fleeting opinions and wants. So the senators elected every 6 years have a little bit more freedom to govern, and as they see fit, and that was the intention. Now, on a more drastic note, Supreme Court judges are elected for lifetime, and this is supposed to insulate them from politics and taking sides. So that is limiting majority. The separation of powers is the 3 branches of government: executive, president, legislative, Congress, and judicial is the courts. And they're independent of one another, but they have different jobs. You can look on page 48 and you can see how they're all connected. The next thing is checks and balances, and even though each of these branches has different jobs, they can check the other, and you need to be familiar with the ways that they do this. And like I said, we will be getting that more in January and February. So that's checks and balances. There's a great table or figure on figure 2.4 on page 50. You need to look over that. You need to memorize it and know what it's all about. It shows you the checks and balances and separation of powers. And I think that pretty much sums up 2.5.